What if one simple food swap could improve your child's focus and behavior? Let's talk about the impact of food on the brain. We all know what we eat makes a difference in how we feel, how our gut works, how our brain works. But do you really know? So, we're going to dive into that and what are the most common culprits of the foods that impact your attention in a negative way and what you can do about it because you got to take action, people. That's why you're here. So, foods can impact your neurotransmitter function of the brain, right? So, if we have foods that cause excessive dopamine spiking, they're not helpful, they're not nutrient dense foods, it really can impact our symptoms of related to ADHD. It can impact a lot of things, way more than ADHD. But that's one of the biggest ones. And of course, it impacts our gut brain connection. And just to understand that our gut is connected to our brain and there's a pathway called the vagus nerve. When we eat healthy food, our brain works better. But when we have foods that are inflammatory, it affects how our gut works. 90% of serotonin is created right there in that gut, and we need healthy levels for our kids to be focused. And just know that some kids are more sensitive to foods, particularly kids with ADHD, due to sort of genetic variants, genetic makeup, biochemical differences, and they make reactions to these foods even more prominent, right? And if we have a propensity towards, having difficulty with inflammation or even detoxifying these inflammatory foods that we're going to talk about, and some other ones are going to be much worse. So just know that the wrong foods can fuel ADHD symptoms, and here are the worst culprits. So, the 6 foods that you want to avoid. So, number 1, artificial dyes and colors. I think there was a point where we were talking so much more about this, and then we shifted to some other things. But food dyes and colorings found, particularly red dye 40, yellow 5, blue 1. And we've had some changes, which are good and they're helpful in terms of removing. But in our country, these dyes are very common in American foods. And hopefully that will change because in many other countries they're not legal. But they are in research linked to hyperactivity. I know I was a kid, my mom made, Philomena made everything from scratch. And even then in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't as common. If I ate processed foods, I literally would throw up because my body wasn't used to it. I almost was lucky that that happened to me. And, I was very, very sensitive to chemicals and particularly dyes. So, it sounds like, oh, that stinks. No, it didn't stink, Roseann, because Philomena was making some awesome stuff. We want to be careful because your child's sensitivities to these, dyes and chemicals can really cause very observable behavioral reactions, sometimes immediately if you're lucky, but they can be delayed as well. So we want to have alternatives, right? So you can use, food dyes that are great are things like blueberry, natural beets. Those are natural colorings that can, if you're making goods and you're making something cool, that's really helpful. The number 2 food you want to add is high sugar foods and, simple carbs, right? So if it's white, it probably doesn't have anything in there. And, these are cereals. I know we're a culture that has cereals for breakfast. It's not really super healthy unless you're having something like oatmeal or a granola cereal. These are just loaded with sugar, as well as things like white bread and juices and soda. Why are we avoiding this, right? So sugar causes spikes in, blood sugar, and that can really lead to both hyper behaviors and energy crashes. So on the hyper side, you're going to see like your kids, wired and, all over. And on the other side, the crash, you're going to see tired. So wired and tired. You can look very inattentive. It can affect your focus. And, the alternative to this is you wanna have complex carbohydrates, so it doesn't mean you can't have bread and all that other stuff. You wanna have nuts, you wanna have protein. When you really see that your kid's very affected, wired or tired, you really wanna make sure that you're adding in healthy protein to keep their blood sugar very level. I actually see this so much in my one-to-one clinic. It's often surprising, and for parents, yet they know their kids are very reactive to foods, and know, again, that kids with ADHD and other clinical issues, their genetic components, their variants may make them more susceptible to reactivity, right? Just like me. Number 3, artificial sweeteners, right? So, your aspartame, your sucralose, these are still found in diet sodas, gum, low carb, low calorie snacks will use this. And we think we're doing better by giving our kids low calorie snacks. Kids need protein and fat. When you're giving it without all the junk, it doesn't make them heavy. It's what their body and brain needs. It's the filler foods that have a lot of sugar and the white foods that cause problems. So why do we avoid these, artificial sweeteners? Well, they actually interrupt neurotransmitter function and gut health, right? So that really can affect your focus, your mood, feelings of stress and anxiety, right? Your gut health is so important and critical. And I know it feels overwhelming, but I'm telling you the 6 biggest culprits because shifts can really make a difference. You want to use natural sweeteners, right? You want to use honey, maple syrup, monk fruit. And these are really sweet. And the reason why these are healthy is that, they are actually, food components and they have nutritional value in there. And they're not as associated in the same way with all these spikes. It doesn't mean you should have a cup of maple syrup. Okay, number 4, preservatives, right? So really that's what I was most sensitive to. Some of the ones you're most, MSG, BHT, BHA, these are still commonly in a lot of foods, packaged snacks, frozen foods, processed meats will have this. And so, it's just a matter of simple switching and checking. But it is linked, these are chemicals linked to hyperactivity, anxiety, or impulse control. Use products that don't have this. Really focus on whole foods for your kids and minimally processed. And here's what's great about where we are in the world, right? These foods are readily available. And you can get them. So it's a matter of switching. I mean, one of my favorite grocery stores is the local grocery store. It's ShopRite. It's like family owned. They have like 14 of them. They have in their deli their own products. They have things without that. Just a matter of looking and saying, well, does it have what additional chemicals it has? What can I swap to? And on a global level, we have a lot of other products, right? That, Applegate Farms, there are products you can find in all the big box stores and, try to buy these things on sale and freeze them and things like that. Number 5, dairy and gluten. Everyone freaks out about not having dairy and gluten. The problem is with gluten is it's poison. It has chemicals in it. And we know that our kids are very reactive. They're inflammatory foods. This is, through research, we know this. We know that wheat in America has glyphosate. That's what I mean when I say it has poison. Who does well with that? Nobody. But, our kids with genetic variants, kids with ADHD may be way more sensitive. And these products, right, it will destabilize your gut. It affects neurotransmitter function, right? Everyone always thinks ADHD is 100% genetic. I mean, I'm trying to really change that conversation here, not just in this episode, but all that it is. These are factors that dysregulate the nervous system and really impacts how kids can function with their attention, their executive functioning, their cognitive. That's why when people make these changes, there can really be some awesome positive changes. And everyone thinks food is a long game. I'm not saying it's not, but boy, can you get some quick wins by changing your food, Okay, caffeine. A lot of people drink soda. It's just so crazy to me that people drink soda. So soda, it's caffeines, in chocolate, right? So you got to be careful what kind of chocolate. I'm a big fan of dark chocolate. And actually, when I work one-to-one with people, part of what we do is some genetic testing, and often it does recommend dark chocolate for them, which I love. So, not every kid loves it, but caffeine can really give you the jitters. It can cause that rush. And then on the other side, the crash, and also create a dependency. There's some, and remember, we're talking about kids, right? So there's lots of talk in the groups, the Facebook groups about caffeine helping. And you know what? It probably can help when you're older, if you're using it in the right way, not too much, but not for kids. So alternative, always get your kids drinking herbal teas. It'd be really incredibly helpful to have your kids drink herbal teas when they're not feeling well. So starting long before that could be helpful. You really want to have magnesium rich snacks like pumpkin seeds. Think about, how am I going to power up my kids' brain? Just simple diet tweaks, adding more omegas, whether you're using supplements or you are adding things like salmon and walnuts and different forms of protein. Really, really, really incredibly helpful. You have to prioritize protein. If your kid is struggling with focus, that is critical, especially in the morning. And you really want to have fat in the morning too. You want to increase fiber. So many of these overly processed foods don't have fiber, and you want to hydrate. I don't think we talk enough about hydration. Kids don't drink a lot. And when you are dehydrated, you can have symptoms like headaches, brain fog, you can be fatigued. So just making sure your kid is drinking enough is important. And, I have kids who don't drink a lot. And so, we get creative. Like, can there have extra fruit, things with high water content? Are they going to have soup? Maybe they like hot. They can get some, herbal teas with honey and whatnot. So it's really important to power up your child's brain with the right foods. And I hope you got really excited about what we're talking about. Don't get overwhelmed. Start with one, observe behavior. Don't observe behavior when you yourself are dysregulated. So make sure, go back and listen to episodes about co-regulation. I would love to hear from you. Drop in the chat ways that you really are helping your kid eat better and questions you have. And if you're new to me, make sure you're subscribing and following.